Town Band Banter with Doc and Dave. Every week, two longtime friends and colleagues in the world of music, David Price and Donald Doc Smith, get together to discuss the triumphs as well as the twists and turns of lifelong learning for the dedicated members of thousands of civilian community music ensembles of every shape and size. Your comments and suggestions are always welcomed through email as info@townbandbanter.com, Facebook, Town Band Banter, and Instagram, #TownBandBanter. And now for our hosts, Doc and Dave.
All right, Dave, you ready? Here we go.
I'm as ready as I can
Season
be, having
two.
to walk all the way up this hill.
Well,
to get up here.
what hill was that? All the way to Wartburg Institute, which is fantastic. We're so happy to be here with Dr. Concetta Tomaino, one of the founders of this whole concept of music therapy. So we're thrilled to be with her.
Nice to see you.
Dave, once again, is surrounded by trumpet players.
Oh, God.
Because, you know,
Can't get away
the
from
trumpet
it.
player and the
It's so
drummer,
hard.
you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
But that's all right. So this is episode 11.
11?
Yeah, so it's our
Already
21st
season.
episode. We're moving, and we're not even a year old yet. So it's going quite well, and we're anxious to keep expanding. And we're really thrilled, like I said, to be here with you today. So Dr. Tomaino, maybe you could just give us a little bit of a background of how you got into. You're famous for all these other things, but we made touch with you because you play trumpet in the Lehman College Band, and so that was very lucky on our part. But how did you end up playing trumpet after all of this? And I'm fascinated with the accordion side of it too, because I grew up surrounded by accordions in Scranton, Pennsylvania.
So I grew up surrounded by accordions in the Bronx.
Right.
And I started taking music lessons when I was 9 years old on accordion.
That's about that right time.
And studied for 6 years or so on that. When I was in high school, I always wanted to be a medical doctor. And so when I was in high school, I was really focusing on sciences. Wanted to get on the basketball team, didn't make it because girls' rules and boys' rules were different back then. I played by the boys' rules, so I got in trouble. Not being able to follow all those girls' restrictions.
Well-behaved girls
exactly.
really don't do anything.
So my friend said, "But you play a musical instrument already. Why don't you join the band? Because we can use musicians." I said, "I don't know if I want to study something new, but I had seen Louis Armstrong and Count Basie when I was a kid at a place called Freedom Land in the Bronx, and I said, if I ever play another instrument, it's going to be trumpet." So I did. The band director gave me a hard time, but I proved myself. He asked me to play military escort on the mouthpiece to see if I could do it.
All right, yeah.
And he says, if you could do that, I'll let you play trumpet. So I did, and I did it so well that he gave me a brand new cornet that he had just bought for a guy, and he said. So I ended up really doing well on trumpet. Was pre-med at Stony Brook University in New York, and wanted to take trumpet lessons.
Right.
And in order to do that, I had to become a music major.
Oh my.
So my sophomore year, I auditioned for the music department. Ronnie Anderson from the City Ballet was the professor there, as well as some other great grad assistants. And so I ended up playing with all these ensembles. And at first I didn't get in because I couldn't play all the contemporary type of music.
Right.
I couldn't read it, I just couldn't count it. But by my sophomore year, they needed a cornet player to play one of the Strauss pieces. And so the orchestra director said, "Can you come in and do that?" And I said, "Sure, I'd be happy to." And then one after the other, I started playing on all these ensembles. And so by the time I finished college, I had been solo cornet with the band, with the symphonic wind ensemble.
Right.
And it's also there that I had to make the decision of what to do in my life.
Right.
And so it was my junior year, but do I become a doctor? Do I do music? I didn't want to just do performance. But it was in my junior year that I found out that there was a field called music therapy.
Yeah.
And
which started in the 1950s.
That's
This
right.
is well after that, right?
That's
Years were that?
It was sometime in the 70s or
It was-
80s?
This was mid-70s. I graduated college in '76. most of the colleges that offered music therapy degrees were in the Midwest, Kansas, Michigan,
Okay.
you know, and I really couldn't leave home. I was on scholarship. And I was the first girl in my family to go to college, so even
Wow.
that was really tough.
Right. Mhm.
And my mother, if I told I was playing, I didn't tell them I became a music major, because they would have disowned me, which is my fault, but almost did.
Yeah.
But the
If they only know where all that led,
oh, well,
you know,
my
like,
mother,
my
my
goodness.
mother forgot. All I had, they gave me. But the band director at Stony Brook was Jack Kreiselman.
Right.
Was this phenomenal clarinetist and conductor. And it turned out that he was also the band director at NYU,
Right.
which had just started a master's program in
Oh.
music therapy.
Perfect. Right.
And he said, boy, I was playing solo cornet, and he said, boy, if you can, you know, I'll just get you in and talk to the professor there. And that's what happened. Literally a month after I graduated, I was on my
Right.
first course at NYU. And then I ended up playing with all the orchestras and
Right.
bands and shows and everything at NYU too.
Thank goodness. And NYU's always been known for that flexibility, you know, like kind of create your own program.
that's
a lot
what
like Ivy League schools, yeah.
they were really focused on the clinical aspects as opposed to in compared to just research and education.
Right.
That if you want to be a music therapist, you really had to have that clinical in-person experience, not just the knowledge of what it was.
How cool is that?
Personally speaking, was it something that you all of a sudden would click like, oh, this is how I can put together
Well,
my desire to be a doctor and my music? All of a sudden it hit you like
well, that's
an
what happened.
epiphany?
Well, the weird thing was is that, you know, I had this background in science. I was this real science geek.
Yeah.
And when I was doing my clinical experiences, one of my first ones was working in a nursing home.
Oh,
You know,
perfect.
and most of my training in music therapy is in psychotherapy. NYU was really known for an amazing music psychotherapy graduate program.
Mhm.
But I'm working with people with end-stage dementia who were written off as being not there, you know, no responses, not aware of anything.
Right.
And they're screaming and yelling and whatever. And one day I had to play guitar because that was required.
Right.
So I'm singing this song to these people who I was told had no brains left. And I start singing, "Let Me Call You Sweetheart." And the screaming stopped.
Right.
People opened their eyes.
Yeah.
They started singing. And my science geek head, and I tell this story all the time, because I'm saying, well, music is vibration in the air.
Right.
If the brain can't process the vibration, then how does somebody know it's a song?
Right. Yeah.
And so there was functionality in these people who were written off as just being bodies.
Right.
Yeah.
That was 1978.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
I said, I got to find out what it is about music that can reach these people so I can help them.
Right.
And then in 1980, I came to Beth Abraham, where Oliver Sacks was the neurologist, and he had just written about his experience in Awakenings
Yeah.
and how rhythm could animate people who were immobile by
Right.
this disease.
What was Beth Abraham? What is
Oh, this was a long-term chronic care hospital in the
So that's
Bronx.
where he was.
That's where he was.
Okay.
And then I became the staff music therapist in 1980.
Right. Oh,
And I stayed,
fantastic.
and I was there until
Because
20.
your master's in
my master's and doctorate are from NYU.
and doctorate in music therapy.
Yeah.
Oh,
But
so,
I did some neuroscience courses at Columbia too,
yeah, fantastic.
later on.
Yeah. Well, you went and taught them because NYU has to help Columbia. You know, like
Oh,
I'm just
yeah,
kidding.
yeah, no.
Yeah.
The
They don't
rivalries.
share, they don't share.
No, that's fantastic. But we missed. There's this missing part that fascinates me with you. Growing up in Scranton, Pennsylvania, I was surrounded by the first band I played in was led by an accordion player, and I was in a wedding band. That it was an accordion player. He ended up playing at my wedding too, but by then he had a keyboard,
Yeah.
you know. But the accordion was something very big. Does the name Serge Basiliga ring a bell for you?
No.
He was like Myron Florin does.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Right?
Yeah, Myron
But
Florin.
Serge Basiliga from Scranton, Pennsylvania used to kick his butt
Really?
in competitions.
So I used to play. I think I told you I played trumpet with a poker band,
Right.
Polish poker band.
And I did too, yeah.
Two Easters of Pulses. So we were out in Scranton all the time.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, Pittsburgh, Scranton,
Sure.
and then up at Swan Lake, So
You needed chops and a
Oh, I played
female
the first-
trumpet player playing
So-
polka band.
So I
was,
played the first. I
Yeah.
played the first part, which was the clarinet parts.
Yeah,
oh yeah, no, you
And
needed
non-stop
chops to
for
be able
hours.
to play
In
that.
fact, oh, who's the guy from famous polka guy? Jimmy Sturr. So we used to
Right,
play.
Jimmy Sturr,
We used
yeah.
to play next to him, and he'd have the trumpet players from West Point
Right,
playing in his band.
right.
And so he would like grab me and say, you know, if I could have girls play my band, I'd like pull you over.
There you go. Juan Luan. There were all these,
yeah.
you know, all these names,
Yeah,
and he
Frank
was near us.
Federowski, yeah.
Yeah, and they used to. My friends would laugh at me that I was playing in a polka band, you know. But at that
was
stage
tough.
in the '80s, you
It was
needed
big.
chops. But they were
Especially the Polish.
right. Sidemen were
polkas.
making over $1,000 a
Oh, yeah,
weekend.
yeah.
And then, you know,
Polish,
I'd be playing 5 weddings and they'd make a couple $100, you know.
You know, it was funny when I was at NYU. I ended up playing in so many different bands at the same time because I had to get money too.
Right.
And in fact, I was playing with a Latin salsa band. And this, because I thought music therapy would be my part-time sort of side job, and I'd be playing at that point.
Because it was a new field.
And I was doing a lot of
Yeah.
playing.
Right.
And I was playing with a big band, and I was doing rehearsal bands with these really big trumpet players in the city. But my father passed away in 1978. I was just finishing my master's. It was in between. My mother wasn't on Social Security. I had to get a job.
Right.
I get this job at Beth Abraham, and it's the full-time music therapy job, so I grabbed it. The week I get the job, the guy who headed the salsa band calls me up. He goes, "Connie, we're going to Europe. We just got signed with Columbia Artists."
Oh no.
And I said, "No, I can't go." And he says, "We have to go." So this was like I thought this was the end of my life.
Right.
Everything was going to be over, you know. I didn't see any future.
But the future was all in accordion, you know. Like no, but you kept getting blockaded with that. That was a major instrument at Marywood University where I went.
Well, you know, for music therapy, it was.
It's perfect.
Oh, it was perfect.
Absolutely perfect.
I mean, I have pictures all over the place of unicorns.
Yeah.
When you play accordion with a patient, it's so interesting because people who are minimally responsive pick up cues from the environment.
Right.
And so when the accordion breathes, they breathe. You
Right,
know, I mean,
right.
they just like sort of get into the ambience of the accordion too, and it's loud, so it really, you know, projects the sound as
Right.
opposed to guitar.
As I was reading your book, I mean, that was all coming to me, and it all of a sudden hit me that
This is
humans respond to choral music because it's the human sound, right?
Yes.
And the breathing in
Yes.
and everything
Yeah.
out. That's very strong. It's harder to do that with a string instrument, guitar, you know, like or keyboard instrument,
Yeah.
but not the accordion because it breathes,
Yes.
just like a wind instrument.
Yes.
So wind instruments it works well, and I thought the accordion you could do everything
And
with
you
it.
can transpose.
And transpose.
time.
Well, that's the guy who plays accordion in our band has the automatic transpose,
I
and
used to
also
do
you
it
know,
all
like
the-
he could be any instrument I want him to be.
Oh yeah.
Right? It's
No, but
amazing.
you know, somebody starts singing a song in a different key, I could, you know, it's all cycle of fifths on the left.
Right?
So I
Yeah.
could
Right.
just like,
Oh, yeah,
it's
yeah.
the same fingering.
You just move down to
Yeah.
the left hand
It's
keys.
real easy,
Right?
yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's really easy for you. It's
Yeah. Well, trumpets you have to transpose.
You know,
what's
there,
up,
just a ridiculous sideline here. There was a group in California. They call themselves the Accordion Terrorists or something like that. And what they do is a group of them, and you can hire them to go into some kind of a business meeting or something like that. They
To
go in
disrupt
like
it?
Lady of Spain, and then they'd go. Something like that, you know.
That's
It was kind
that's
of
funny.
one of those things, but
That's not therapy, Dave.
Yeah, I know it, I know it.
Terrorism is just not.
it's just not there.
But I'll bet you know.
But
like,
anyway,
through-
you missed your opportunity
Yeah, yeah.
for a good
You're-
laugh.
you're-
I could terrorize people. Like
if you need to, yeah, whatever. Well, to change anything, you know, you're viewed that way, you know, and you've broken so many glass ceilings along the way.
Yeah.
That's really remarkable. You know, that's the Bronx girl in you.
Yeah.
My wife is
Italian
from
Bronx.
Riverdale, so it's still
Southern
yeah.
Italian, you know, thick-headed, hard-headed.
There we go. That's great. So let's get back into the music therapy in band. Now we're in band,
Yeah.
right? And we talked a little bit about this as we were coming in, that like all bands are not going to be doing the definitive recording of the piece that they're working on. You know, there's more reasons for being in these community bands
Yeah.
than just perfect performance. You know,
That's
and that's really what we're after here. And then also, not so much that there's therapy, of course, But what I love about your approach to music therapy is that if physical therapy is to recover use of muscles, then music therapy is cognitive abilities and all these other parts of living is joyfully, into your senior years. And that's really what we're after with the band. So I'm fascinated with your perspective of sitting in a band with people who might be aging and watching all of a sudden going through those 7 stages of dementia and all of a sudden hitting. So
well, it's interesting because I've played in so many different ensembles, especially at Lehman,
right,
and some of the community bands. I've been with people of all different ages,
right,
for 40-something years,
right,
at the same people, and watching those changes.
Oh
over
yeah,
time
the same
too.
people for the same. Yeah, right. Okay.
And you can see little
Long-term
losses
study.
maybe in the way they talk, maybe they're a little forgetful, but they can still play.
Right.
And so my institute, the Institute for Music and Neurologic Function, was started back in the 90s because people weren't studying music in the brain yet. And
Right.
the impetus for this institute was to get those dialogues going.
Right.
Now scientists know that when you study a musical instrument, when you play a musical instrument, you're actually energizing and exciting complex networks in the brain.
Right.
And they become more resilient the more you use them.
Right.
Because music is so complex and it allows for that. So some of the, I would talk about clinical benefits of being in a community band. There's obviously the cognitive part of that,
Right.
the enrichment of that. There's memory recall. There's also things like attention, because people who start getting dementia and cognitive loss, it's usually poor short-term attention
Right.
that declines. But if you're in the band, you have to focus. You have to pay attention. You have to listen to other people, right?
Right.
And then there's this social dynamic part of being in the community ensemble,
Right.
which helps with mood, self-work, being connected to other people, which is so important. Because loneliness is also a precursor to dementia and cognitive loss.
Right. It all kind of spins together,
Exactly.
right? It just one thing leads to the
Yeah,
other. And
yeah.
One of the things that I know Doc and I struggle with is he's directing the Jamestown band, and I've directed community bands myself. And one of the things is that you want to create a good sound that attracts people, but you also want to make it so it's a very positive experience. And sometimes we just have to put away that ego and say, okay, it's like we were just saying, well, how much is just good enough?
Right.
Are you striving for performance perfection, or are you striving for a community process or community music experience that's just positive in just being there?
Right.
You know what I mean?
I think it's a little
And
both.
we struggle with it
I
sometimes,
think that probably the most important thing is that everybody has to be in tune.
Right.
Because the general audience will pick up things being out of tune, because acoustically and it's
Right.
going to sound weird. Missed notes here and there,
we tend to fill those in. We tend to cover those in our mind if it's in the middle of a melody.
If the audience has a pleasant experience and things are in tune, then most of the mishaps they're going to forget because they had a pleasant experience.
Our audience is so busy singing along.
Oh,
Like sometimes as building the program, I put a sing-along at the end, and I'm thinking, why am I bothering?
Yeah.
They've been singing along all the way anyway, which
No,
is
that's
great.
that's what you do, and it's important. I think people know if they're going to a local band playing, they have their expectations are different than if they went to
Right,
Carnegie
sure,
Hall
yeah.
and spent $300 for.
Which
Well,
we're able to exceed all the time.
Yeah.
That's been the
That's what you
cool
have to
part
do.
about this band as it's growing. It's only 30 years old, so
But
it's unlike some
also,
others.
You also create your program for the audience.
Right,
too.
absolutely.
Because if you're going to do something really high-end and too much of that in the ensemble, even if it's a great ensemble, if it's not the right audience, they're not going to appreciate that either.
It needs
So
to,
it needs to
programming
be-
is everything.
Yeah.
There's no
Yeah.
doubt about that.
And the more you can attract or play music that the audience is looking forward to, the more likely you are to
So
keep
that's
that
leading,
audience.
that's leading perfectly into the process. This isn't really about the performance as much as the process.
Right.
And so what music
How do you let that go?
Well,
if you-
it's interesting because even with the people that we work with in music therapy, I mean, I work with seniors who have cognitive loss.
Right.
Or I work with people with physical disabilities and
Right.
stuff. And for them, being able to make music together
Right.
is as therapeutic as you can get.
Absolutely.
Because it validates them as individuals.
Right.
It validates that they can still be creative and expressive,
Yeah.
you know, and they can do that together,
Right.
you know, and if they can perform for their family and friends, that's like icing on the cake,
Absolutely.
you know.
Or perform with their family.
Exactly.
And
Even
friends.
either
Because
that-
Dave
either
talks
that-
about in Westerly, there was the one, was it trumpet section? There were 3 generations sitting next to each
Oh,
other.
That's great.
You know, grandson, grandfather, and
Yeah.
grandfather, all sitting right
Yeah.
next to each other. Tim Lotzenheiser talks about that too, that, you know, he got to play with his mother. You know, like he played drums and she played another
Cool.
instrument, I
That's
forget what.
nice.
And he goes, we communicated in a depth that most kids can't communicate
Yeah.
with their parents.
Yeah.
You know, it's something brand new. It's something very, very special.
Yeah.
You know, so I like that. And we discovered doing the Jamestown band. I've done community bands all through my life. You know, since starting as a kid, how important it is
Oh, yeah.
to those folks. It keeps them alive.
Yeah.
But getting more into the specifics, let me ask you a question, because what I was really after is that the people, all of a sudden, the first thing I start noticing is that they're having problems just realizing where they are rhythmically, and not adjusting. Like all of a sudden, the awareness of everything around them is gone too, and they'll just play for measures on end, but you know, in the wrong place. So I actually talked. I don't know whether this is a hint or whether you have, maybe it'll help you bridge into this too. I asked one of them one time. I had a really good. He was really starting to struggle. Brilliant man. You know, was a CEO of a corporation and everything else, but was probably in that 5th stage of dementia. When, you know, with denying it and everything else. But I got him into the place that you're struggling with some of these things. What can I do to help with that? And he goes, I don't know that there's anything you could do to help. He goes, where it seems to happen for me is when I'm counting rests
Oh,
or holding long notes and I can't find my way back in.
yeah.
You know, so that's, I don't know what that triggers for you.
Yeah, no, I think that if you compare, usually because I've played next to people like that, and I think if you pair him up with somebody sitting next to him
Right.
who knows that, and
Right.
can sort of like tap him on his foot and say, like, not now, you know.
Yeah.
And so he has the reassurance that he doesn't have to worry because somebody's going to cue him when he needs to get in, because that'll help him focus better. If
There you
he's
go.
not
That's a great idea.
preoccupied by having to look ahead, because that's gonna, you know, sometimes I tell my patients who have like cognitive issues that if you have to think too much about something, you're gonna lose
Right.
the ability to do it.
Right.
And one of the great things is a lot of things we could do automatically and do very well. He probably plays really well.
Yeah.
He just can't, it's that timing and counting that gets in the
Right.
way. So if he has somebody sitting next to him who he knows will tell him when to come in,
Yeah.
you know, or if he's off.
I mean,
Like just tap.
there's so many layers going on with decision making, executive. You know, like
Oh, yeah.
when you're playing, and that's why it's using your whole brain, I guess.
Yeah.
But when it gets off track, it's your whole brain is lost. You know.
If you think, because you have to think, you have that process of analyzing it in the moment is what's challenging.
Yeah.
So if there's external cues or something else the person can
So
depend
something
on,
physical,
that,
because yeah.
then it stops that disruption.
You talked about how automatic in the book. The book is fantastic,
Oh,
by
thank
the
you.
way. I have to make sure I saw one here. Yeah, so I'll hold it up. There, it is fantastic, and it'll be in the credits in the bottom.
Oh, great,
You know, I
thank
highly recommend. It was an easy read, but it was a good read. I enjoyed it. But we talked about you talk about how people automatically move with music. I was a marching band director. That doesn't always work out
Yes.
that way.
Depends on
It takes
how you
some
want them to
training.
move.
But because of all of the repetitions of doing that and different things you're doing while you're playing, you know, horn flashes and stuff like that, when we would take the Penn State Blue Band, at the end of the year we'd do an indoor concert and sit them down and play through all the music, because the music was fantastic too. But it was really hard for the students to play without that movement. They lost that, you know. It was something because the movement became such a part of that performance
Yeah.
that it was kind of neat. But that connection's kind of maybe you could address that too, because that's what you said. You do something physical to cue them,
Yeah.
to get into the physical domain.
Well, there's anybody who's ever studied an instrument knows how hard it is to start with an instrument. And all the, you sort of have to get the motor memory
Right.
to be able to play well, to be able to go above just the, the basics. And once that motor memory and stuff is established, then everything is fluid, or it should be.
Right.
And so there's a different level of cognition that happens, because now you're being creative, you don't have to look at the mechanics.
Right.
When some of those disruptions happen in the brain, and you're focusing on the mechanics rather than the creativity, it sort of creates this like noise in the brain, and
Right.
keeps like the fluidity of performance becomes a problem.
Yeah. Just how our brain processes things too. I talk about that often, that sometimes people try to practice things, like just with a metronome and get, like physically like that. Well, that's difficult. The example I use is, I'm sure you haven't had any teachers like this, but they speak, say brilliant things, but it's very difficult to listen to them because they don't break it all and they don't have any inflections. And if you think it's hard to listen to that, try to talk that way. It's very unnatural. So if you're practicing that way, that's not natural.
Right.
Say, oh, I'll do all the dynamics and everything later. It's all part of the big picture, and if you try to eliminate any of that, it makes it harder. So you seem to be agreeing, yeah?
Yeah. I had the good fortune when I was at Lehman to meet Bill Vacchiano,
Yeah,
the
right.
principal
Okay,
trumpet of the
sure.
Philharmonic.
Yeah.
He actually was playing with us, and then he and I became good friends, and I used to go up his house and play duets.
Oh my
At his
gosh.
house.
See, I was going to say we should play duets. Now I'm thinking maybe not.
No, maybe, it's okay. But, so anyway, he said when he was a kid, when he was studying trumpet, that they used to play vocal pieces.
Right.
In fact, Aubin, all those things are vocal pieces.
Maurice
Why?
Andre put out that whole album of
Yes.
opera arias.
Because you're supposed to be lyrical. You're not supposed to be this automaton
Right.
playing notes.
Yeah.
Although some did, virtuosic things
Right.
on. But still, it's supposed to be lyrical.
Right.
And so the first thing he was taught was how to be lyrical with a trumpet.
I think that was part of my early upbringing too. Thank goodness, because when I was doing beginning band, the first thing I taught was phrasing.
Yeah.
That
that's
the
exactly right.
expectation is not to sound bad for 2 years. It's just, if you sound bad, you're doing something wrong. Fix it and sound good. You should sound good right from the beginning. And then that helps with these folks too, who have lost everything and all of a sudden come back. And it fascinates me that my mother, who passed a few years ago, would sing, like 5 verses of a song she learned as a child. She never lost touch with naming family members and everything else, but during COVID, she really regressed a lot. She was in a facility like this, and my sister pulled her out and brought her home. And she lost her ability to dress herself and everything else. And I thought, well, that's gone now. No. Not when she came home and was, like in a loving environment, with family and motivated by the Echo Dot. That was the secret for her. She was so afraid that she was going to miss lunch and dinner that I bought her an Echo Dot.
Nice.
And I got her to do, Marie, it's time to go down for lunch. Every day.
Yeah.
And she said, oh, thank you, you're welcome. And she goes, she was so nice.
Yeah.
And then I also taught her
those are
about
wonderful.
play Frank Sinatra.
Yeah.
Or play this.
Yeah.
And this is someone who is terrified of technology, but had a friend.
Yeah.
And just felt so much better that knowing that, okay, I'm going to be reminded. I don't have to worry about lunch or dinner or anything like that. One of our guys in the band was doing hospice. And when I told him about the dot solutions, he said, oh my gosh. We're doing that.
Yeah.
He hadn't thought, why haven't we thought of that yet? So, not just the Echo Dot, we're not sponsored by them, but that was the answer for there, and that really improved the quality of life.
Things like having to think ahead, planning are such challenges.
Right.
Even in band and stuff, those types of things that can be remedied by some kind of external cue or helping device.
Well, AI.
Yeah.
We're so afraid of AI, but we've been annoyed by spell check for how many years now?
I remember doing recordings when I was at Stony Brook. Ron Anderson, who was the trumpet teacher there, was technology with computerized things, and was becoming part of music, our ensembles and stuff. So we would have like little click tracks, to be able, because when you were doing stuff in these really abstract meters, in order to stay with each other, everybody would have their little click track that would keep them in time, so no matter what you played, you would always be in the right place.
Wow.
So that was technology back in the 70s before.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
curious about the rhythmic aspect of things, and I'm a percussionist, by the way. I don't know if you knew that. But I did some work with the program I showed you earlier, but I did some work with some Parkinson's people.
Oh, okay.
And I was hired several times by the Rhode Island Parkinson's Association, and they were big into the boxing thing.
Yeah,
I don't know if you know. Yeah,
I know
yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
I teach for the Parkinson's Foundation.
Yeah,
Oh, do you?
I observed a few of those, and I found some problems with it. But that being said, I'm always amazed. I was always amazed at how Parkinson's people could be influenced by rhythm.
Yeah.
And I think I was one. Just if I could, real briefly, there was one place I used to go once a month, and it was assisted living. There was a woman who had Parkinson's. She was very sweet, very nice, but had a considerable tremor as a result of that. But I'd hand out the drums, and she'd be right there in the front. And boy, did she love it! But
Yeah.
when that was happening, there was no tremor.
That's right.
It would disappear.
That's right.
And
That's
she would key into the program. She loved it. She would sing along to it. Other than that, she didn't speak much.
Yeah.
Really, you know. So it's amazing to me. I just found this an amazing thing that even with the disability, how the brain can shift for some reason. Can you
I can
add
explain
some?
it. So Oliver was actually the first person to write about rhythm and Parkinson's in
Yes.
Awakenings, in the very first one. And then I worked with people with these movement disorders back in the early 80s.
Yes.
And then started presenting on using rhythm to cue behaviors. Now we know through neuroscience is that the auditory system, like that timing of the beat, actually stimulates parts of the brain that are responsible for motor initiation and control. And so that timing actually causes these neurons in the brain to fire at exactly the right point.
So is
People
it
with Parkinson's
right?
can initiate internally that action.
Can or cannot?
Cannot,
Yeah.
because of the disruption of these neurons.
The lack of
So-
dopamine, I believe, is
Right,
yeah,
so
yeah.
the auditory system externally then forces those neurons to turn on.
Ah,
And so it's like you jumpstart
yeah.
their battery to move.
Right.
And then as long as the rhythm's going, the pattern of that sound is going to synchronize and help them synchronize their movements.
Yes.
You mentioned the woman who had tremors. The thing about Parkinson's, it tends to be a resting tremor, not an intentional tremor. So once they're engaged in something, it shuts off that circuit of the automatic
I see.
tremor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So in fact, the group I'm doing at
Yes.
1 o'clock is a Parkinson's.
Oh,
So
really?
probably
Oh, fascinating.
lots of drums.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, we should get to the last questions.
Yeah, let's
We'd
get
love
to the
to
questions.
wrap, because
Okay, thank you,
I could
guys.
talk with you all day long.
Yeah, we could.
Particularly about recording stuff. Now that's
Yeah.
what was your most memorable experience with a community music ensemble?
Oh, wow, there's so many.
Right. Well, what's the
60
just the
years.
first one that
That's
popped out in your mind?
Oh.
Do you need any rhythms to bring this to mind?
No, I'm thinking about some great, bands I used to play with that, like the composers would show up and stuff like that. But I have to say that playing at Lehman College and having Bill fucking and sit next to me was like one of the best.
It's
things in my
better if
life.
you don't know who he is until after you
Right.
play,
Right.
right? Yeah.
I was like
better.
all nervous, but at that point I was the solo cornet player, so I was doing all these fancy, nice solos with that band, and he would tell me, he goes, boy, you sound really good, and then I told him I was like so afraid of him, I would never take lessons. And he goes, oh, come over to the house, we'll
Play duets.
play duets.
Duets is that thing. It is
We used to
amazing.
do all the transposition things.
Oh, those
Played in
drove
this
me
key.
crazy. And then a couple measures later, you're in another key, and a couple
and
measures.
different clefs and stuff.
Yeah.
And then I got to, my payment for the lessons was taken into the diner for Belgian waffles. That's all I.
Because he didn't need money. It wasn't about money.
It was about the, getting together. So.
Duets is that'd be a really cool episode, because like music, I learned a lot playing duets with people. You try to aspire to play with better players, but then most of the time I end all of my lessons with duets.
Oh yeah.
Every lesson I end with a duet, and no matter how advanced they are, try to do a simple duet. It's fine to play simple things really well. So.
My husband is a low brass player. We went to high school together.
Uh-huh.
He plays in all these bands too.
Oh, cool.
And when our kids were born, because both of us were playing, we'd like basically take my 6-month-old or whatever and give it to somebody in the front row
Right.
of the audience to watch while we
Oh,
played.
yeah, yeah.
And then at some point with the summer band, he put a playpen next to his seat,
Right.
you know, because he was in the park.
Yeah.
And my kid would be there like bouncing around, and the conductor was
Yeah.
okay with it.
Well, hopefully
That's
the people
okay.
in the front row were bouncing the kid at the right tempo.
Yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah.
I saw that one time when we were marching with the Penn State Blue Band, 300-piece band, right? And and they're not in rhythm with us.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, they are messing with this kid's brain.
That's right.
It's just really
You know,
messing you up.
There's actually this great scientific study out of McMaster University.
Uh-huh.
Laura Trainer's the neuroscientist. So she's actually done these studies where little infants are bounced out of sync.
Oh yeah, right.
And
Okay.
it causes, if you're in sync with somebody, it causes pro-social behavior. And if the kid is bounced out of sync, they ignore the person if they need help.
Oh my gosh.
Isn't that wild?
It is wild.
Yeah.
So that, we
So
need to,
so being in sync with somebody is actually something that we're neurologically programmed for, to be being able to accept somebody as a friend.
I mean, I always
So,
to tease my students about the pitch police are coming if you're
Yeah.
playing too, but the rhythm police are just as important.
just as important. Yeah.
What was the big challenge with an ensemble, and how was it overcome? Well, first, you're getting to play accordion instead of trying. It's so
Yeah,
sad
yeah.
that you didn't get to do that, and I'm so thrilled to be able to use that in my band.
Yeah, so you know what, my husband, like I said, plays all these solo brass. So he plays with a German polka band,
Okay, yeah.
which I sit in
Uh-huh.
so I get to play accordion too when I sit in.
Perfect,
And
right.
trumpet, so sometimes I'm
Right.
playing trumpet, sometimes I'm playing accordion. So
Yeah.
I usually fill in when the other trumpet players.
And you have the jokes that go with it?
Yeah, I have to, yeah.
Because
Well, there's lead guys in the accordion playing, so Eric is the
Right,
is the
right.
band leader and he plays
Because it seemed like all those German books that I had jokes with them
Yeah,
too.
it was a
Right?
presentation.
It's
Yeah.
part of the whole thing.
Yeah,
All right.
Yeah, we had that in my high school. My high school band director, I talked about this. He started up a German band.
Right.
In the middle of Connecticut. You know what I
Okay.
mean? But it was. But I remember jokes and things like that put in and stuff like that. I was probably the first. I have to brag. I was probably the first guy in Rhode Island that started a high school klezmer band.
Oh, fun.
Right, and that book was there when I followed him a couple directors
Now,
later. It was
Doc
there.
was probably the first guy that did a mariachi band.
Oh, fun.
And at that time, there wasn't a Latino kid in the entire district.
Right.
And then it turned out my lead trumpet was a Latino, Mexican actually. Well,
Well, there was a year or two that we had a bunch of Jewish kids in the band, and we got talking about klezmer music one time, and I said, hey, let's try to start it. And I got some music, we did, and they did a great job. It was fun.
right. So then I started doing like Wednesdays because we had the Jewish holidays off, and the kids didn't even know what that was about.
Yeah.
So we did on Wednesdays after school. We had come to ensemble day, and in September it'd be klezmer.
Yeah.
October it'd be the
Okay.
German band, and November it'd be like going to the holidays, and then Chinese in January and stuff. It didn't really work out that well,
Well, you-
but it was a cool idea.
One time, one of my first jobs before I got the job at Beth Abraham was to do a summer camp, and it was these kids. There was one kid who was really bratty, and he didn't want to do.
There always is.
So he didn't want to do any of the songs. He didn't want to do like the sing along stuff. So and it turned out he played the trombone.
Oh.
And so I said, well, how about if we start a rock band, and you could play the trombone, somebody else played the drums, and we ended up doing Saduk. I did an arrangement of it for everybody who could play
Right.
anything.
Right. Yeah.
And they performed. It was like the parents never thought they'd ever have like good music
No.
at this summer camp.
Yeah.
So
How about
you
that?
never know.
All right. The future.
But usually we like to wrap it up with the future of.
Yeah.
With AI and so many things going on, and the future of community bands in particular, and maybe you can also add in the future of therapy in
Well,
music.
I'll tell you that because, not so much AI, but because of the internet and COVID, one of the groups that I do is for veterans with PTSD.
Right.
But we have musicians who weren't necessarily veterans. We have a guy who was a bass player who played with all these amazing jazz musicians who lives in Virginia. He's all alone, he lives with his son, but doesn't get a chance to play. There's not much jazz going on. The pianist with our group used to play with him, and so he zooms in
Oh. Okay.
with us.
Right.
And if it wasn't for Zoom, and we need better technology for like syncing things, but we have him jamming with another guy who plays piano.
Right.
And it's perfect. They just do sort of a call and response, and there's a little delay. So I'm able to reach people all around the world.
Right.
Through Zoom. You know, I've had patients in the bedside in the hospital, in a coma, you know, working with a family because of technology, you know.
I have
And things
lessons
like
tomorrow
that.
morning in Japan at 6 a.m.
Yeah.
We
You
use
able to play?
FaceTime. I'm finding
Yeah.
that that's linking much
It's
better. I'm
easier?
playing
Sorry.
duets with them.
Okay.
Is there any
Yeah, so try
delay
that.
with that?
You know, it depends on the technology. The weaker link
Yeah.
Oh,
does it, you know,
yeah,
and
yeah.
they have, I have great Wi-Fi and they have great Wi-Fi, and it's rarely a problem. Occasionally it is.
So the thing with technology is being able to include more people.
Right.
I'm sure there's going to be adaptations that go to instruments that make it more, or at least easier. I have a wind device, a digital device, that I know kids that who have developmental, disabilities, who maybe physically not able to play in the band. There was a girl who played French horn, but using this wind device.
Wow. Cool.
So it was programmed on the computer to sound like a French horn.
Right.
She was able to play in the ensemble, but just using this puff switch thing.
So it doesn't have keys,
No,
because
'cause
there was
it's
the
all blown.
Yamaha came out with that thing with the keys.
No, this was all.
Just pop.
But,
Oh
yeah.
wow, how cool
And
is
you can
that?
play
That's
the
cool.
notes. It's a jam box. It's cool.
Yeah, right. So and the community bands, future of community bands,
Oh,
I
hopefully
think we're in good shape.
yeah, I hope so. Scarsdale band that I've been playing with for almost 40 years has been going strong, and I think that's because of Alan and people that you've heard about.
Right.
Who keep it going, but it's the community who contributes the money to keep it going. So
Right.
this is a band where professionals and students sit next to each other.
Right.
You know, and I think a lot of people still crave for that sort of old-fashioned sitting in the park, getting music. You know, and hopefully the classic stuff that when ensembles play is still of interest. But I think as long as kids are getting music in school, there's always going to be an interest of it because the parents want to know
Right.
that the kids are getting something out of it.
Well, the parents and get to participate in it,
Exactly.
get to be involved in
Yeah.
the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. All right, well, that's a great way to bring it to a close.
Yeah.
You know, like how many reasons, and we always end with the same phrase, but we've given them so many more reasons to do that through this episode. Thank you so much
My pleasure.
for having us here at Wartburg, and it's a wonderful facility, fantastic place.
Thank you.
Yeah, and really love your book. You know, so hopefully that will because that just came out. It's fairly
Just
recent, right?
24, yeah.
Yeah, you're right, in 24, so that's fantastic.
And we do have it did become an online course, so people who work in senior care, who
Yeah.
want to become a senior care music specialist, and even if they don't play an instrument, because I have caregivers who would like to know how to use personalized music to help somebody with dementia,
Right.
they can learn all of that by an online course.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, good. So I'll make sure I'll
That's
put that
open to
information in too. Give me that link and
Yeah.
I'll make sure
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
on there too. All right, so that's a great way to close. We always
go.
close the same way by saying, just keep on playing.